All right. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining me. If you got your questions, you can post them. It should be below the video if you're on a smaller screen like a phone. If you're on a larger screen like a computer, it should be to the right of the video. So it doesn't look like we got any new questions in there at the moment. So I just refreshed it. Let me refresh it again just to make sure. Yeah, so no new questions in there right now. So if you got a question, now's a good time to ask. We'll get answered pretty quickly if you do. In the meantime, I'll just be answering emails and stuff. All right, so John C says, "Hi Q, when you're in the middle of a round and start losing your rhythm tempo, what's a good way to get it back?" Um, that's tough. Really, just to kind of make practice swings where you're just kind of focusing on, you know, you're just focusing on it. That's really all it is. That's what I would recommend doing. I don't have any magic tricks. It's just sometimes it's tough when you're out of rhythm and tempo and stuff. It's tough to get it back. There isn't. I don't know of a other than just kind of taking practice swings and kind of focusing on it. I don't know of like a magic trick that's gonna bring it back. Um, One of my favorite drills for rhythm and tempo is a half backswing full follow through. So you can kind of do that, do a couple half backswing full follow through because when you take a half backswing, it's hard to get quick, right? Um, because my opinion is, or why I think it kind of works, is that when you take a half backswing, your focus isn't on power. A lot of times people get out of rhythm and tempo because they're trying to kill the ball, right? Um, and then when in doing that, it gets them out of position. They actually don't end up hitting it solid. They don't, uh, you know, you don't hit it solid, and then you also don't hit it very accurately either, right? Even if you did hit it solid, sometimes you don't hit it very accurately when you do that either. So, yeah, it can be tough. So doing like a half backswing full follow through, your focus moves away from trying to crush the ball because you're only taking a half swing to proper form. You know, what does it take to hit a solid shot? Making ball first contact, center face contact, having the face in the path, and then just trying taking a little bit longer swings, carrying that same rhythm and tempo that you were doing in the half swings. So that's like a little way that you could do it. You could try to do it, and something you can give a try. But yeah, that's always tough um, when you kind of lose that proper rhythm and tempo. All right, keep the questions coming. So John C says, "Okay, thanks. So it sounds like the half backswing and full follow through would be a good way to practice on the range." Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's really how. If I'm warming up for a round and I have the opportunity to go to the range, or if I'm warming up for like a practice session, it's essentially what I do. I start out with wedges, half backs, just taking half swings, sometimes even shorter swings, and I just try to build up to like a full swing. And then once I get there, I try to carry that same rhythm and tempo to everything else. So Charles, H says, can you give me some help with bunker shots, downhill, uphill, and when ball is higher and lower than feet? So the downhill lie bunker shot is probably it's one of the toughest shots out there. It's really, really difficult. The only thing I can say with all of these things, it's go with the slope, right? And that's whether you're hitting out of a bunker or you're hitting off a normal grass or whatever, right? So what that means is if I have a downhill lie, I want to kind of angle my body so that way I can swing with the slope. So I'll get my body kind of more angled this way so that way I can swing with the slope, right? If I have an uphill lie, I'm going to angle my body to go with the slope, right? So that way I can swing with it, right? Now, when you have a downhill and uphill lie, the ball's going to come out lower. That's why it's a tough shot, because usually when you're in a downhill lie in a bunker, right? A lot of times you're hitting up over a lip. So it's hard to get height on that shot. It's just really difficult. So sometimes when you have a downhill lie like that, and if you have a big lip in front of you, sometimes you have to take your medicine. You just kind of have to go out sideways because you might just end up in the bunker again, or even worse, hitting it into the bank of the bunker and like plugging it in the bunker. That's a way you can get yourself in that kind of situation. So you got to practice it to kind of know, okay, how high is this ball going to come out, to have a good feel for it. It's not something you're just going to know, the next time that you see a downhill bunker lie or have one. You got to practice it to kind of understand it. But yeah, it's going to come out lower, just like the uphill, a little bit of an uphill bunker shot. That's usually like the easiest, right? Because you're going to hit it a little bit higher, right? And that's usually better for those greenside bunker shots. So, that's what I would look at is, something like that. Now, if you have it above your feet, below your feet, again, it's going with the slope. So if the ball's above my feet, the technique and everything, it's still the same. It's just that the ball's going to come out a little bit more left because when the ball is above your feet. So let's say, I got my angle finder on here. So let's say normally I'm like this, right? My face is open, but you can see that my club face is pretty square because I have my hands lower, right? Well, if I'm up like this, let's say it's way above my feet like that. Well, look, that club face has become more closed. So the ball's going to come out more left, right? On the other side of that, if I have the ball below imagine my feet are elevated, right? Well, now let's say I get elevated. I won't get on my tippy toes here. Imagine I got downhill. Well, look where the face points. The face is going to point more to the right. So aim more left to accommodate for that. But the technique and everything, it's really just the same. You just want to angle your body to be able to swing with the slope and understand how the ball is going to come out according to that slope. You got to practice it to really know, to be able to judge it very well. So William G says, hi, can you demonstrate good technique to hit a punch shot as a recovery shot, a hit out of trouble back to the fairway? Often I need to hit this shot to keep under tree limbs as I try to get back in play. Yeah, so basically what I would do is I would take, and again, these are things you got to practice. I know you don't want to necessarily practice punch shots or, these kind of low, kind of shots, but in order to be good at them, you have to practice them. I can sit here and tell you how to do it, but that doesn't mean you're going to be able to do it or be good at it. So you just got to go practice it. So basically what I would do is I would take a lower lofted club. To know how low a loft you need, you got to practice it to be able to judge that, right? Because it's going to depend on how much clearance you have. It's going to depend on how far you want to hit it. A lot of those things. But basically what I do is I'll put the ball kind of more back in my stance. I'll lean my body forward. And really what we want to do is we want to kind of finish low, right? So we don't want to come around into a nice high finish. We want to drive those hands forward and finish low and feel like we're keeping that club head below our hands as we're finishing. So again, ball more back in the stance, body leaning forward. I'm going to bring this back, and I'm going to drive my hands forward and finish low. It's going to look like that, right? You can even hit it lower if you kind of hook it a little bit. If you can hook it or kind of hit a draw with it, you can hit it even lower, because when you draw the ball, you're closing the face to the path. And when you close the face, it de-lofts the face a little bit. So you're going to be able to hit it lower. So what I might do, if I really want to, if I have the opportunity to hit a draw, right, which sometimes when you're hitting out of, if you're in a situation where you're punching out, hitting a draw is a lot of times a good thing, because you can kind of loop it back. So that's typically, what's happening in my situation. Now the fade's even more difficult, right? Because when you hit a fade, the face opens to the path. When the face opens to the path, it actually adds loft, and it's not going to go as low, right? So hitting a low slice is much more difficult than hitting a low draw. So again, if I'm hitting a draw, all I'm going to do is I'm going to get my body forward. I'm going to aim my body to the right. Ball's going to go back in my stance a little bit. I'm going to shut down the face a little bit, but it's just the same thing. I'm coming through. I'm going to let that ball kind of turn over, because I just closed my face a little bit at address. So I basically took a little bit of a stronger grip. The fade would be the same thing, but it's not going to go as low. Again, things you have to practice to get good at and have a really good feel for it. So Dan B says, how can I stop flipping my hands at impact? The result is my 7-iron only goes as far as my 9-iron. Well, if you're hitting your 7-iron as far as your 9-iron, because it doesn't usually work out to where you're flipping your 7-iron, but you're not your 9-iron, right? So that's not probably what's going on there. You're probably not hitting it solidly, and that's why your 7-iron is not going as far. Or maybe there's something wrong with your 7-iron or something like that. But if your 7-iron is going as far as your 9-iron, it's not because you're flipping, because you're probably flipping your 9-iron too if you're flipping your 7-iron, and vice versa. So I would look at the club. I had a buddy who, every time he hit his 6-iron, it wouldn't go anywhere, right? And I had him like, let me see your 6-iron, and I went like this, and I was easily able to move the shaft inside the hosel here. And if it's like that, when you're not transferring all the energy to the ball, because the face is going to twist at impact, the collision is going to make that twist. So maybe check your 7-iron to kind of see what's going on there. I'll talk about flipping, but I just want to mention, like, you might be flipping, but you're also flipping your 9-iron too if you're flipping your 7-iron, right? It's not, if you're hitting your 7-iron as far as your 9-iron, it's not because of flipping necessarily. And also, when you flip, usually it's the highest lofted clubs where you lose the most, because they have the most loft. So when you flip, you're adding even more loft. Like, by comparison, you're adding a lot more loft. So anyway, but that's what I would maybe check that. But you may also just not be hitting your 7-iron very solidly. Maybe you're hitting your 9-iron solid. You're not hitting your 7-iron solid. Maybe you're chunking the ball or not hitting it in the middle of the face. And that's really what's, kind of leading to that. The longer the club is, the more difficult it is to control where you're hitting the ground and where you're hitting it on the face. Now, it's usually not that big of a jump to go from a 9-iron to a 7-iron, but there's a lot of people that really struggle, hitting their 5, 6-iron, but they hit their pitching wedge great, right? There's a little bit more of a difference between the two, and that's expected. That's naturally that's what's going to happen, right? So I'll talk about flipping, but that's more than, based on the information you provided, that's more than likely not really. You might be flipping, but you're probably flipping both and not just one. All right. So now a great tool to use for this is the blue brick. So with the blue brick, we have some great things you can do with shaft lean. So the first thing is the wedge impact position, right? So this kind of shows you where you actually want to be. And I would get to where you can get shaft lean with a wedge before you're getting it with anything else. Because as I mentioned, shorter clubs are easier, right? So if you can't do it with your 7-iron, you're not going to be able to do it or if you can't do it with your wedge, you're not gonna be able to do it with your 7-iron, right? So get to where you can do it with the wedge, and then you can kind of work your way up through the bag. So basically, what you do, we got the wedge impact setting here. I'm gonna take this. There, I'm gonna take my alignment stick. These alignment sticks here come with the brick. If you want to pick up a brick, you can go to the resources tab on the website, and then that will take you to our resources page where we list all the training aids that we recommend. This is one of them for sure. So once you do that, you place the ball kind of in line, basically with the middle of the brick here, with where it's going in, and then you can kind of get an idea, like, okay, this is where I want to be. This is the amount of shaftling that I want to have with a wedge, right? So you can kind of get that feel, and then as you're hitting it, you kind of try to match that up with it, right? So that's one way, a good way to kind of give you some feedback. Another thing that I really like with this is the wedge launch angle, right? The wedge launch angle. So that's here in the corner. We have the little hole for the wedge launch angle. So how that works is I'm going to put, it basically just holds the alignment stick vertically. So it holds it vertically, and I'm not going to do the actual, but I think it's 2 alignment stick lengths is how far you want the ball to be. So basically it'd be like this. And again, I don't know if I have quite enough space, but basically just imagine like this is 2 alignment stick lengths to here. And then I'm going to put the alignment stick in there. And I'm going to hit shots, and I would kind of put it off to the side of your target. But what I'm going to look for is I want my wedge to launch below the tip of this stick. Basically, the top of this stick, that's a 30-degree launch, the top of this. The best pitchers in the world launch below that. Somewhere 27 to 30 usually is where they're at. So when I'm hitting these, I want that to launch below the tip of this. And if I'm doing that and I'm hitting it solidly, right? If you hit it thin or blade it, obviously it's going to go really low, but that's not obviously what we want, right? For a solid center face strike, I want to be able to launch this below this level. And if I'm doing that, that means I've got some shaft lean, right? That means I'm going to be pretty close to what I was just doing a second ago, right? So I would just start and try to launch that below that. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit farther away than what it is here. I have it that far away because I have enough space in here to do the 2 alignment stick lengths. But that's a really, really great way to train that. There's also a tool that I like. Now, this isn't on the resources page or anything. This is just something personally that I like. But this is called the Tor rotation stick. And it's a great way. You can kind of do this drill with using the Tor rotation stick. Just Google it. It's just called Tor rotation stick. And I just like it because it clamps to the end here, and it's got this stick that comes out. So now if I come through and I flip, right, this is going to whack me in the side. So if I can hit shots where this isn't hitting me, right, I can just start out with some shorter pitch shots. Like I would just start with some short pitch shots and just work your way up. Because as I mentioned, if you can't do it in a 30-yard pitch shot, you're not going to be able to do it in a 60-yard pitch shot. So I think this is one of the biggest things that I run into with a lot of students is a lot of students want to walk before they can run. Sorry, I said that the wrong way. They want to run before they can walk. We need to walk before we can run, right? A lot of students want to go to full speed, but the problem is that speed takes away feel. So, if you could already make swings where you're not flipping and doing all that stuff, then you would already be doing it, right? You wouldn't be asking the question. You would just do it, right? But the problem, I don't have a secret that's just going to make you suddenly be able to do it. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. We have to regress to where we can do it, and then we can progress it from there. So regressing is going slower, taking a shorter swing, using training aids, doing it in a practice swing. Because the reality is that if you can't do it in a practice swing, there's no way you're going to be able to do it with the ball, right? If you can't do it slow, there's no way you can do it fast, right? If you can't do it without the training aid or with the training aid, excuse me, there's no way you're going to be able to do it without it, right? So you have to regress to where you can do it, right? So think about it this way: if you're a weightlifter, and let's say right now your max is like 200 pounds or whatever lift, right? That's like putting on 300 pounds and expecting to be able to do it, right? It's silly. You're just not going to be able to do it. The only way you're going to get to 300 pounds is by getting stronger with 200 pounds and then progressively adding weight, right? Little by little by little, doing it successfully and then getting stronger. It's a process, right? But yet everyone wants it right now. And I understand the need. I would, when I was working on stuff, I was hoping I would have it right now too. But unfortunately, it's just not based in reality. That's not really going to work. So I would start out with shorter, slower swings, focusing on getting it below that, focusing on solid strikes, keeping this thing from whacking in the side. Now, if you don't have to purchase this. I think it's like $50. It's not a cheap thing for what it is. But I've gotten my money out of it. I like it a lot, and I've recommended it to a lot of people. But what you can do using these alignment sticks probably wouldn't work that great because they're these are like the collapsible ones. But if you just get like a normal like one piece alignment stick, now you can get these ones. These are a little bit longer. These are like the ones that you can find at like Home Depot, Menards, Lowe's, stores like that. And they're not really intended for golf. They're intended to go at the end of your driveway, and they have a little reflector on them. So like if you don't have anything that kind of shows like where your driveway starts when it's dark, or if you live somewhere where it snows, there's snow on the ground, a lot of times you can't see where your driveway starts. You can put this on each side of your driveway, and you'll be able to clearly see where it starts. But you can also use them for club training or golf training, right? So what you do is you just take the alignment stick, take half of it, put it down the shaft, the other half goes out the butt end, and now we have the same thing. The only thing is you got to hold it on there. So it's a little less convenient. And if you are going to do it this way, I recommend holding it on the bottom, like in the fingers. To me, it's the easiest way to do it. But that's the way you can do it as well. So I highly recommend kind of using that as a feedback tool, and it will train you to understand like, okay, how am I going to get this club? Like if I can't, because right now, if you're flipping, what's happening is you are getting the club to the ball mostly with your arms and your wrists, right? You can't do that with this. If you do that with this, you're going to whack yourself in the side. So it kind of forces you to learn how to kind of move your body a little bit better and to do a lot less wrist and arms and stuff like that, a lot more body rotation to get the club to the ball. I'm guessing that's why they call their training aid the tour rotation stick. But this works great as well. It's just a little less convenient. That one just clamps to the end, and you can grip the club normally. So that's really what it is. Now there might be things specifically. There's a lot of reasons why people flip, and a lot of times it's because the club face is open. It might be because the club's coming down steep. So when you get to longer and faster swings, that's where things can get a little bit fuzzy. I'm working on getting forward shaftly and stuff like that. So I definitely recommend working with a teacher, an instructor to help you kind of navigate that, because that can be very, very difficult. Now, I do offer online lessons. If you look above the video, there should be a link there where you can sign up for the online lessons. If there's not spot available, you can join the waiting list, and you can jump on whenever whenever I open up spots and send out an email to the waiting list. But yeah, this is how I would start, and maybe you can figure it out as you go to longer and faster swings. But people have a lot of trouble with it because it's hard to know exactly why, because there's a lot of things that can lead to that. There's several things that can be like the root cause as to why you're flipping or things like that. So, a lot of times it is because of the club face or because you're coming down steep. It could be because it feels more powerful. There's a lot of reasons for it. So yeah, definitely recommend working with a teacher as you get farther along in that. Or a lot of times people hit a wall and they're unable to kind of get through it. But Dan, I wish there was something I could give you that would make it, stop flipping right away. But I will say it's the hardest thing to change in the golf swing. For most people, it's the most difficult thing to change. And the reason why that is, in my opinion anyway, in my experience, is that there's just so many variables of impact that are involved with that part. And it's also happening at the fastest point in the golf swing, right? So where you're releasing the club, it changes where the club face is at impact. It changes where you're hitting it on the face. It changes where you're hitting the ground, right? It can change the path of the club through impact. So these are all things that determine where the golf ball goes, right? Whereas, for example, something that's fairly easy to change in the golf swing is the turn, right? Getting a bigger turn. That's usually one of the easiest things to change in the golf swing, assuming you're not physically incapable of doing what it takes to get a good turn. But assuming that you're physically capable of doing it, it's typically a very easy thing to do because it's just taking what you're already doing and it's just lengthening it, right? It doesn't usually have that much bearing on what's happening at impact, other than it improves your speed, right? So it's usually a little bit easier to change that because of that. And it's also not happening at impact. It's happening at a slower point in the swing. It's happening at the top of the swing, where things technically kind of come to a stop, right, and then start up again. So that's usually the easiest thing to change in the swing for the most part. If you're changing the actual swing, setup things are usually easier, right? Because it's static. You're just making a little tweak. But yeah, actually changing things in the golf swing, especially impact things, it's a little bit more difficult. All right, so John B says, I'm trying to keep my club face pretty close all the way going back and turning to the top. It seems to encourage me to not come down over the top. Is there any reason why I should limit this? Well, you would limit it if the club face is getting too close. If the club face gets too close, then you're going to hook the ball, right? So as long as the ball is going straight, you're fine, right? But if you're keeping it close to a point to where you're actually coming into impact and the face is too closed and you're hooking everything, then I would tone it down. That would kind of be the drawback to it. And really, what the focus should be on is impact, where the club face is at impact. And if feeling like the club face is closed in the backswing leads to a great impact position, by all means, yes, that's awesome. That's the way you want to think about it. You don't want to just keep the club face closed in the backswing to keep it closed, because that can lead to bad things or whatever. So like I said, it can lead to hooks, right? So you don't want to hook the ball necessarily, right? There's a time and a place for that. If you're wanting to hook the ball around the trees or something like that, but that's not generally what we want as a stock shot pattern. We want our stock shot pattern to be pretty close to straight. The best ball strikers in the world, typically the ball is going to go straight and it's going to fall one way or the other, right? So like Dustin Johnson, he hits fades. Brooks Koepka, he hits fades. Jon Rahm, he hits fades. Sky Scheffler generally hits fades, right? So if you look at all these golfers that mostly hit fades, if you actually watch them on TV, when you watch them hit shots, those balls look like they're going pretty darn straight, and that's because they are, right? Typically what's happening is the ball goes up, and then it's going to, for a right-handed golfer who hits a fade, it's going to fall to the right. For a right-handed golfer like Rory generally likes to draw the ball, right? Tiger generally likes to draw the ball. So, those golfers, they hit it really darn straight, and it just falls to the left. Right-handed golfer with a draw. So that's really kind of the stock shot pattern that you would want. So be careful of just doing things in the swing just to do them. I'm not saying you're doing that. I'm just saying, just as a general advice, we don't want to do that, right? We want to look at what's going on at impact, right? And then, from there, you would make tweaks to the swing. The only acceptable thing I would say would be the top speed golf system, right? Because these are all the things that we see people do in the golf swing, or that we see the best players do in the golf swing. Now, and they all lead to great ball striking, right? So, for example, like our stable fluid spine, if the spine's moving around everywhere, and it's leaning this way and leaning that way, and it's sliding, translating too much one way or the other, right? That can be problematic. There's no great players that do that. So doing that blindly is usually going to lead to great results, even though you're not specifically targeting an impact variable. But outside of the top speed golf system, you really want to target specific impact variables. That's why we have courses like ball then turf, right? That's an impact variable. Shallowing out the club, that addresses an impact variable of the club path being on the right place, right? So most of the courses, pretty much all the courses outside of the top speed golf system, are specifically looking at a impact variable and improving that impact variable. The 20-minute distance fix is no different, right? The impact variable that we're focused on there is speed, right? So we're working on technical things in the swing that help you to develop more speed. So that's really how you kind of want to address most things. One of the biggest mistakes that I see recreational golfers make is focusing so much on their takeaway. They're just focused, and I understand why people do it, because I'm guilty of this myself, and I imagine any avid golfer has been in this situation where I'm starting over. I'm rebuilding my swing, right? 99% of the time that is not necessary. But I've been in the same mode where I'm hitting it so bad, starting over, revamping my swing, and outside of grip and setup, right? What starts the swing? The takeaway, right? So that's where a lot of people go, and they're like, well, I got to get my takeaway perfect first. The problem is that's just going to lead you down a road of even more issues, unfortunately. So I recommend looking at and this is how I generally teach, is looking at, okay, what are the impact variables that you're struggling with, right? So generally how I teach is I like to ask golfers, what are the impact variables that we're struggling with, right? Because really, it's really simple. Don't overcomplicate it. It's really actually very simple. There are 4 impact variables that are there's more impact variables that are important, but I'll say that there are 5 because we'll throw that one in there, right? So one, and this is the number one impact variable for me, is ball first contact, right? Or ground contact, where we're hitting the ground. Because none of the other impact variables really matter that much if we're hitting the ground first. If we're hitting the ground 3 inches behind the golf ball, the other impact variables don't matter. It doesn't matter if the face is open or closed, or you're shallowing out the club, or if you have much speed or anything like that. It's it just doesn't matter that much, right? So that's number one, right, for solid contact. The next piece is strike location, hitting the ball in the middle of the face. If we don't hit the ball in the middle of the face, we're not going to transfer any of that energy, as much energy, to the ball. Also, it has an effect on where the ball is going, too. We won't get into that, but it also has an effect on that because the face twists open and close depending on where you're hitting it. So, for example, if I hit it on the toe, the face will twist open, ball will start more to the right for a right-handed golfer. The next piece is the face angle at impact. Where is that pointing, right? And then the piece that goes along with that is the club path, which is shallowing out the club. Are we getting the club path down to the ball? Are we swinging in to out to in? Are we swinging very neutral, right? If we're perfectly shallowing out the club, you're going to be fairly neutral through impact, right? If you're over shallowing it, you may be a little bit too much from the inside. If you're not shallowing it, coming down steep over the top, you're going to generally be out to in, cutting across the ball. And then the last piece that I was debating whether to put in there or not is speed. We don't want to forget about that. That's a very important piece. I mean, you could say that's the most important piece as well, because nothing matters if this club doesn't have any energy. But yeah, those are the pieces. So that's what I ask students. What are we struggling with, right? What is the struggle? Are we struggling? Because are we hitting the ball solid, right? So solid comes down to hitting the ground in the right spot and hitting the ball in the middle of the face, right? And then do we have good ball flight, right? That comes down to controlling your face angle and your club path, as well as your strike. Your strike plays a role in that as well. And then are we hitting the ball far enough, right? Do we have enough speed, right? And that's really what it comes down to. It's really not anymore complicated than that. Now, typically, I'm looking at your swing, and pretty much all the time, what I see in the swing most of the time is that pieces of the top speed golf system are off, right? Our spine. So, for example, let's say I got somebody who's chunking the ball, right? They're hitting the ground behind the ball. Stable fluid spine is probably one of the biggest things that I see, and that's a hip slide. So I see a lot of people who do this move, and then they're still on their backside when they're starting the downswing. So that's stable fluid spine because our spine shouldn't be way over here. It should be moving forward. It should be transitioning a little bit forward and being angled away as we're starting the downswing, right? So that's a lot of times something that I have people work on, right? So that's really what it comes down to is um, if you're going to work on something, if you're not really familiar with, okay, I don't really know what I'm doing in the swing to cause it. That's my job. That's what I get paid to do, and you don't necessarily need to. It would help to know those things. Then you wouldn't necessarily need me. You could apply it yourself. But if you're just going to be applying um, technical things to your swing blindly, the top speed golf system is really the only thing that you should be doing. The other things, the other courses that we have are specifically looking at impact variables, and you could look at, okay, I struggle with speed. I'm going to go to the top to the 20-minute distance fix. I struggle with ground contact. I'm going to do ball then turf masterclass. I struggle with my ball flight. I'm going to do the 20-minute shallowing fix. It's really as simple as that. And then if you want to work on getting overall good swing, it's the top speed golf system, 20-minute shallow fix, 20-minute distance fix. Those are going to help you to get all the things you really need. Because all the best players in the world, they all do those things. They're all nailing the top speed golf system. They all have tons of club head speed, and they all shallow out the club. So now there are exceptional outliers, right? There are people that don't swing super fast. Although, I'm trying to think if there's anybody out there that's really swinging slow right now. There used to be. Pretty much everybody swung slow until John Daly came along, Tiger came along. Now everyone's swinging fast. But yeah. Okay. All right. So we've answered everything so far. We got 20 minutes or so left here. We got any more questions? All right, I think I had a package delivered, so I'm gonna go grab that package real quick because it's raining, and then if you guys have more questions when I get back, we'll answer. All right, I'm back. All right, so Dan B says from behind, I line up the hole with the line of the golf ball. However, after taking my stance, it looks like I'm aiming to the right. Well, I mean, that's why you use the line, right? You use the line so that way you don't have to question where it's lined up. If you do that, if you don't do that, then you need to see the right line, and that's really what I prefer. I'm not a big. In fact, I think you may not like this, Dan, but I think that they should not allow that because I think it slows down play. I played with people that they take like it seems like it takes 5 minutes, but it probably only takes like 30 seconds or something like that. But it always seems like it takes forever, and I think it slows down play with people doing that. Um, so I don't see how it's much different than like putting down a club on the ground and like lining it up and then using that to line your body up. I don't see how that's much different than putting a line on the ball and then lining up the ball, um, you know, with the target. So now I do think it's a good drill. Put the line on the ball and see if you can get the ball, see if you can get the line to roll straight, right? I think that's a great drill, but I'm not a big fan of it on the course. I think that they should get rid of it. Um, so if you are someone who, if you are wanting to get rid of that and not do that, here's a way that you can kind of go about that. So I would recommend using a putting mirror. If you go to our resources tab, I'm pretty sure we have one on that page. If you go on the resources tab, this is a putting mirror right here. This is really, really great to kind of see where your eyes are over the ball. And then once you can kind of find where you need to have your eyes are over the ball to see straight, then you can use this to stay consistent with it. But here's how you would do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and find like a dead straight putt that's about 10 feet. Now I'm going to take this, I'm going to put it down. I'm going to use my putter, and I'm going to try to kind of line this up. I'm going to get over this like I normally would, right? And I'm just going to try to I'm just going to wiggle around and move this, get this to where I'm putting the flat side of my putter here on here, and I'm just moving it to get it to where I feel like it's lined up perfectly with that. And once I'm kind of in my normal setup and I feel like I have this lined up perfectly with it, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get behind it and I'm going to use my putter here to kind of see if I'm actually lined up with it. And what you may find is that you're probably, if you did this, you'd probably be lined up to the left, right? Because you feel, you might feel like this is lined up to the right, right? So you're actually probably lining up to the left if you were to do this. And it's a good way to kind of see if you're seeing straight. So then once you realize, okay, my eyes aren't seeing what I feel is straight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this to where it's lined up dead with the center, and then I'll put the ball in here because the ball goes right here. Now I'm going to line up to this. I'm going to get my eyes where they need to be in order for that to look straight, right? And then once I have that, that's where I want to have my eyes, right? Now, generally speaking, what we want is the eyes to be behind the ball a little bit. And then usually when you look at the best putters, the eyes are going to be a little bit inside the ball. Meaning, if I were to drop something from the bridge of my nose here, it would land probably around in that area. That's where you're going to see most players. If you have your eyes ahead of the ball, like not even in the mirror, then it's going to make it difficult to see. If I have my eyes over here on this side of the ball, like toward the camera there, again, it's going to make it because I'm looking back toward the ball and then the hole. Whereas if I'm like this, everything's kind of in front of me. The other thing is making sure you're not looking out the bottom. Like if you're like this and kind of looking out the bottom of your eyes, it's going to make it's not a good. You want to be able to kind of look straight down at the ball, right? So you kind of want to be over it, and then your eyes are kind of looking mostly straight down, right? That's typically going to put you in the best place. Now, let's say you do this and you just cannot find where it's straight. Then you got to train it, right? So there's lots of ways you can train it. One is just by setting this up straight and then just getting comfortable with that, and then eventually you're going to realize, okay, yeah, I'm lined up in a good spot, right? You can use chalk, right? So there's these little things that carpenters use them and stuff like that. It's like string chalk. So basically, it's a string that winds up, and then you pull it out, and then you snap the string, and it'll make like a nice chalk line. You can use something like that. There's also things out there where it's a string that's held above, like, so it's got a little pole that holds. It's almost like a little miniature light pole or electrical pole, except it's holding the line, and you can kind of use that. But there's all kinds of ways that you can do it. But yeah, if you're using the line on the ball, I mean, that's why you use the line, is probably because you felt like you were lining up off. But like I said, I'm not a big fan of it. I like to actually see the line. I guess I'm kind of more old school in that sense. And I like to be able to know that I'm rolling it on the right line and develop a feel for the line, because I always want to trust it, right? If you're in a place where you got to use the line, then the line doesn't look right. Then you got to kind of develop a trust with the line on the ball. I'm not a big fan of that. I'd like people to actually be able to see the line, see what they're doing. But yeah, these putting mirrors are relatively inexpensive. I think that one's like $20 maybe if you go on the link on the website there. So Charles H says, could you give a little more detail on what causes a chunk shot? I seem to do it when I tried to hit the ball really hard. Well, there's lots of things that can cause a chunk shot. It's not just one thing necessarily. There are all kinds of things that can cause a chunk shot. So I can talk about basically the most common ones. So the first one is ball position. People just have the ball position too far forward. I see it all the time. People struggle with chunking and thinning, like their longer clubs. And this is another mistake that I see a lot of recreational golfers make, is as the clubs go longer, they push that ball position more and more and more forward. Well, let's actually try to understand physically what needs to happen in order to make solid contact with the ball, right? So if this hula hoop kind of represents the club arc, so the club's coming down in an arc, it reaches the bottom of the arc and then works back up. The bottom of this arc needs to be on the target side of the ball. So if I'm hitting the ball that way, it needs to be on the target side of the ball. It needs to be a little bit below the ball. They measured all the best players, or not all the best, but they measured a ton of pros, high-level golfers, and they found that on average, the bottom of the swing arc was about 3 or 4 inches in front of the ball. So basically, if you imagine my fist is the golf ball, the club comes down and hits the ball in the ground relatively at the same time, pretty close. Doesn't have to be at the same time. It can be a hair before or even a little bit after is good too. But generally at the same time, it's hitting the ground and the ball at the same time. And then it gets into the ground. And then I'm reaching the low point of the swing in the ground. This would be kind of like the middle of the divot that you might see. And then it's still on the ground, then working its way up out of the ground, right? So that's from a divot being 3 or 4 inches in front of the ball. That's why we talk about dollar bill size divots, because a dollar bill is, roughly about that size. Usually a little bit bigger than that, the divots that you make, but that's roughly kind of the size that you'd want for like a perfect divot, right? Now, there are all kinds of reasons why that may not necessarily be always the case, but we won't get into that. But generally, a dollar bill size divot is what you want. So if I'm making a similar, so let's say, for example, I hit my pitching wedge, right? And I make great contact with my pitching wedge, and my pitching wedge ball position is just ahead of the middle of my stance. I make great contact there. But then I go to hit my hybrid, right? And I push that ball position really far forward. Well, if I'm not getting my body more forward with that club, then my low point really isn't going to change. It's going to stay in the same place. And then now my low point may end up at the golf ball. Well, if my low point is at the golf ball, my best case scenario is that I'm going to hit it thin or I'm going to chunk it, because if I hit the ground at all, I'm hitting the ground back here, right? My best case scenario is that I kind of pick it off the ground, right? And that's a lot of times that's going to be thin. Now, if you have a lie where the ball's sitting up on the grass, like a tee, you can do that and hit it very, very solid. But that's not always going to be the case, right? So you want to have that low point of the swing more forward. So use the same ball position with your 9-iron as you do, and use the same position with your hybrid, right? So that way you're able to make solid contact. If you push that far forward, that's going to make that very difficult. So that's the first thing that I would say with a lot of people that causes a chunk shot. The next piece would be like in the backswing, having a hip sway. So if now I like a little bit of a move to the trail side to start the swing, but we need to get back to centered pretty quickly, right? So that would look something like this, right? So see how I move that way a little bit, and then I still stayed fairly centered with my hips, right? Whereas what I see a lot of people do is they go like this. They really sway into the trail side, and then when they get up to the top, they're like this. They're way over here. Well, if I'm way over here and I need my low point to be in front of the ball, that's going to make it very difficult, right? So that's another thing that causes it. Another thing that can cause it is just maybe you are staying centered, right? So maybe you do move off the ball a little bit, but you stay centered, but you start the downswing from your back foot. There's no lateral movement to your lead side. Again, I need that low point to be in front. So if I'm just twisting my body and then unwinding my body from my back foot, I'm going to tend to chunk it as well, because my low point is going to be before the ball. So that's another thing that can cause a chunk. The next thing that can cause a chunk would be swinging too much from the inside. We talk about shallowing out the club, but you can overdo it, right? If you overdo shallowing out the club, you get the club working too much from the inside, you're going to tend to hit the ground behind the ball. So a good way to think about this is imagine I'm standing in the right-hander's batter's box, right? And I'm at home plate here. And imagine I swing my club in the direction of first base. Where's my club going to bottom out? It's going to bottom out back here, more in front of my trail foot. Well, that'd be a chunk, right? On the other side of that, if I were to swing over the top and swing way to the left toward third base, well, my club's going to bottom out more in front. Now, this is a big reason why a lot of people come over the top, is because they're hanging back, and the only way they can not chunk the ball is by coming over the top. because they're hanging back. So that's another reason why a lot of people come over the top. So that would be one if you're over shallowing out the club. Another one would be early release, right? So if I'm here and let's say I just stop and I release it, I'm gonna hit the ground there. If I'm here and I release it way later, well, I can hit the ground way up there, right? So it can really change my low point based on the release. Now, a lot of you might be, a lot of you have an early release, and I just know that from working with a lot of recreational golfers. I would say probably 80% of golfers early release the club compared to professional golfers, right? So I don't want you to sit there and think the release, that's it, that's what I get, that's what I got to work on, because I know most of you are releasing the club early. You can still early release the club and make great ball first contact as long as you're doing the other stuff. The reason why I say that is I mentioned earlier in the office hours how changing flipping, getting rid of flipping and early releasing is the most difficult thing to change in the golf swing, right? So you might have some low hanging fruit things like changing your ball position or not swaying your hips or, not shallowing out the club too much or, getting to your lead side, getting lateral movement to your lead side before you start the downswing. These are all things that are so much easier to change in the golf swing than the release. So make sure that you're doing all the things that I mentioned before you go directly to the release. That's another big mistake that I see a lot of golfers make is they hear the release and they know that they've been early releasing it for a long time and they want to stop doing it. And it's another reason to stop doing it, but that's going to be a slow burn thing. That's not going to, you can go and work on your release tomorrow and you're still going to be chunking it, when you go out on the course. So look at your ball position, look at how your hips are moving in the backswing, look at how they're moving in the downswing, look at if you're over shallowing out the club. These are all things that are so much easier to change. It's low hanging fruit that you can go to the range tomorrow and more than likely get those things working a lot better. Whereas the release, that's something that takes a long time to change. So you can definitely be doing both, but I'd be definitely looking at the things that I talked about in the beginning. Basically, that's in the order of the easiest things to change, I would say. The hip swing, the weight shift, and then the shallowing, over shallowing out the club. Those are all things that I see that people do that's a lot easier to change. But those are just a handful. There's more things for sure, but those are just a handful of kind of the main ones. And that would apply probably to 95% of about anyone's problems when it comes to the chunking shots. All right, we'll go ahead and wrap it up right there. Thanks everyone for joining me. We'll be back here tomorrow, Tuesday, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you next time.